I want to tell you about how the Rockefeller family, in fact, packages a president. Back in the spring of 1972, a high-profile group of men gathered for dinner with Averell Harriman, the grand old man of the Democratic Party, a Bilderberger and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Also present at that secretive meeting was Milton Katz, a CFR member and director of international studies at Harvard University, Robert Bowie, who would later become deputy director of the CIA, George Franklin, David Rockefeller's coordinator for the Trilateral Commission, and Gerald Smith, UN or US ambassador at large for the non-proliferation matters. So the focus of their discussion was the not too distant 1976 United States presidential elections. Now, Harriman suggested that if the Democrats wanted to recapture the White House, they had better get off their high horse and look at some of these Southern governors. And several names came up. Among them were James Earl Carter, governor of Georgia, Reuben Askew, governor of Florida, and Teddy Stanford, former governor of North Carolina, at the time the president of Duke University. Now, Katz is reported to have informed David Rockefeller that Carter was a very viable candidate, could be sold politically to the American public. And so in the fall of 1973, Rockefeller invited Jimmy Carter for dinner in London in order to better acquaint himself with Georgia's governor. And as he listened to the Southern general, he became convinced that Jimmy Carter was ideally suited to become the next American president. But this not heresy. The Times of London gave an account of the developing Rockefeller-Carter relationship. And this is what they said. Governor Jimmy Carter, 1976 Democratic presidential candidate, has for reasons known only to himself professed to be an innocent abroad, but the record is somewhat different. As governor of Georgia, he is a state aspiring for the center of the New South. He led the state trade mission abroad. And while in London, in the autumn of 1973, he dined with another American visitor, but by no means an innocent, Mr. David Rockefeller of Chase Manhattan Bank. Now, Mr. Rockefeller was then establishing, with the help of the professor Zbigniew Brzezinski of Columbia University, an international group now known as the Trilateral Commission. He was looking for American members, was impressed by the governor, if only because he had ventured abroad and invited him to join. And Governor Carter, perhaps because he was already eyeing the White House from afar, was only too happy to accept. So David Rockefeller felt that Jimmy Carter could project an image of a Southern governor that could be used to, let's say, fool many voters by appearing conservative or moderate, while in fact favoring the most left-wing of agendas. And so the idea was to use Jimmy Carter to court both white and also black voters who would be delivered by the Democratic Party's big urban political machines. And in fact, before moving forward, we should backtrack to the screening process and to 1973. That year, Jimmy Carter and Askew were invited to David Rockefeller's New York estate. Also present was Zbigniew Brzezinski, was helping Rockefeller screen prospects for the Trilateral Commission. And so Carter's Southern gentility charmed both men, but what really impressed them more than anything else was the fact that Jimmy Carter had already opened up trade offices for the state of Georgia in Brussels and Tokyo. And this seems to fit perfectly with the aspirations of the Trilateral Commission. However, what truly impressed them wasn't Carter's independence. Rather, what endeared Carter to the establishment crowd was his ruthlessness and ambition. And you see, Carter's overwhelming ambition and also corruptibility made him vulnerable. It included conniving with his own personal banker, Bert Luntz, to funnel bank depositors' money into Carter's peanut business and into the bank's account of Lance's associates and family members to finance Carter's presidential campaign while waiting for federal matching funds. And so the illegalities involved were enough to send the entire gang to jail. And the key to exposure was in the hands of David Rockefeller and his fellow banking insiders. Thus, ladies and gentlemen, a peanut farmer was plucked out of the peanut field by the CFR, Bilderberger, and soon-to-be Trilateral Commission organizations, and discovered as a potential presidential candidate. Now, in Carter's acceptance speech after winning the nomination at the Democratic National Convention, he attacked the unholy self-perpetuating alliance that have been formed between money and politics, a political and economic elite who, listen to this, have shaped decisions and never had to account for mistakes nor to suffer from injustices. He then added, when unemployment prevails They never stand in line for a job. When deprivation results from a confused welfare system, they never go without food or clothing or place to sleep. And when public schools are inferior or torn by strife, their children go to exclusive private schools. And finally, when bureaucracy is bloated and confused, the powerful always manage to discover and occupy niches of special influence and privilege. So, on the basis of what he said, one may actually feel inclined to believe that Jimmy Carter truly was an outsider. But was he really? Well, let's see. 12 individuals belonging to the CFR Trilateral Combines, according to the June 1976 article in the New Los Angeles Times, helped Jimmy Carter prepare his first major speech on foreign policy. Zbigniew Brzezinski, Richard Cooper, Richard Gardner, Harry Owen, Averell Harriman, Anthony Lake, Robert Bowie, Milton Katz, George Ball, and Cyrus Vance. With a writing team like this, how could Jimmy Carter come up with a bad political speech? He can't. Each of these men was an insider heavyweight with an agenda. Most of them belonged to the Bilderberger Group. All were members of the Council on Foreign Relations and also the future Trilateral Commission. And so in the speech they created for Carter, they created what the American people craved to hear from a prospective leader. Now, Carter's early support group from Atlanta and his featured several people with very close ties to the Rockefeller family for obvious reasons. One of the outsiders was Gombrell. His family was a major shareholder in Eastern Airlines, where David's brother Lawrence Rockefeller was the biggest individual shareholder. However, Carter played the role of an outsider to perfection, and immediately upon entering the White House, he filled many, if not all, of the administrative positions with CFR and trilateral insiders. An astonishing 40% of American trilateral members joined the Carter administration. In all, now listen to this, 291 members of either the Trilateral Commission or the Council on Foreign Relations or both formed part of the Carter's presidency. Among them, of course, both President Carter and Vice President Walter Mondale. And so on December 2nd, 1976 edition of the Wall Street Journal covered the screening of the 16 prospects in Plains, Georgia, and reported that Cyrus Vance, trilateralist, was to be given the position of Secretary of State. At the time, he was director of IBM, Pan Am Airways, and a member of the Foreign Policy Task Force, vice chairman of the CFR, as well as the former deputy director of defense. And so with such an associate, Carter could hardly be called an outsider. Michael Blumenthal, a trilateralist and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, was given the position of Secretary of Treasury, and this appointment was quickly followed by Harold Brown, also member of the Trilateral Commission on Council on Foreign Relations, to the position of Secretary of Defense. Zbigniew Brzezinski, member of the Bilderberger Inner Elite, Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission, was chosen to become Carter's National Security Advisor. Andrew Young, member of the CFR Trilateral Commission, became the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and also Paul Volcker became the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And so the U.S. News and World Report took note of the unmistakable influence of the trilateralists on Jimmy Carter. This is what they said. The trilateralists have taken charge of foreign policy making in the Carter administration, and already the immense power they wield is sparking some controversy. Active and former members of the Trilateral Commission now had every key agency involved in mapping U.S. strategy for dealing with the rest of the world. And so, in fact, if we're to compare Jimmy Carter's words in 1976 to what Ronald Reagan said during his campaign against Jimmy Carter in 1980, we may be shocked at the similarity of language and ideas. These are Ronald Reagan's words. I think there's an elite in this country, and they're the very ones who run an elitist government. They want a government by a handful of people because they don't believe that the people themselves can run their lives. Are we going to have an elitist government that makes decisions for people's lives? Or are we going to believe, as we have for so many decades, that the people can make these decisions for themselves? So let me ask you this, was Reagan an anti-trilateralist? Hardly. Reagan's campaign was managed by William Casey, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and also Reagan's future director of the CIA. Casey was a full-fledged trilateralist, active CFR and trilateralist members such as Caspar Weinberger, Ann Armstrong, David Picard, Bill Brock, William Hewitt, helped manage Ronald Reagan's campaign. Additionally, Reagan's 59-member transition team responsible for selection and screening of candidates for major governmental posts consisted of 28 CFR members, 10 Bilderberger members, and 10 trilateralists. And among them, figures such as Henry Kissinger, Alexander Haig, Joel Schultz, former Secretary of Treasury under Nixon, Donald Rumsfeld, and Alan Greenspan. Yet the maneuvering would never have become nearly as effective or even possible had it not been for the close cooperation between the media and the people under the control of the Bilderberger CFR and the Trilateral Commission apparatus. Because when in December 1975, 7 months before the Democratic National Convention, the Gallup poll indicated that only 5% of registered Democrats wanted Jimmy Carter as president, alarms went off in the plush offices of David Rockefeller. For Carter to win, they needed to create the most elaborate media campaign in history, just like the media circus we have come to expect from any top names in the entertainment industry, all in the effort to convince the electorate that James Earl Carter was indeed America's only hope for a better future. And so Cyrus Vance, member of the CFR, then on the board of the New York Times, and also Hedley Donovan, head editor-in-chief of Time magazine, CFR member, Trilateral Commission member, as well as the director of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, used Time's elaborate range of resources to aid Jimmy Carter's campaign. First, Time painted Carter as an outsider with absolutely no connection to the corrupt politics of Washington. But of course, Time has been pushing Carter for some time. After Time devoted the flattering 1971 cover photo to him as a progressive Southern governor, it used that cover photo in all of Time's ads in other magazines through 1975. And so the Time reports on the Carter campaign were so adulatory that this could scarcely be differentiated from the campaign's own literature. And so in the ensuing 1976 presidential campaign and also stump speeches, Carter's repeated themes became twin mantras. First, the time has come to replace balance of power politics with world order politics, and also to seek a partnership between North America, Western Europe, and Japan. Let me ask you this. Where have we heard this before? Doesn't it sound as if Jimmy Carter was parroting the Trilateral Commission mission statement? And his emphasis on world order and trading partners definitely indicates Trilateral Commission view. And so in campaigning against Carter's presidential candidacy, the publisher of the Manchester Union Leader, William Loeb, made the Trilateral Commission an issue during the New Hampshire primary. He said, it is quite clear that this group of extremely powerful men is out of control and out there to control the world. And so the selection, not the election, but the selection of Jimmy Carter for the office of the president is one of the best illustrations of the market value of political context. You know who you know, how are you going to win, and how are they going to count the votes. And at the same time, it also demonstrates how easy, we're talking about the lack of market value can crush the presidential aspirations of non-favorites, like, for example, Senator Barry Goldwater. And so both John Kerry and George W. Bush have also been financed by the same elite combines, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission. But it really doesn't matter who wins, does it? Because the epicenter of power always seems to remain in the heads of the people with a one world government, one world company agenda.